Hello everyone, this is Srinipai from Accelerator Customer Success. In today's video, we learn about incremental scans and incremental strategy in ADOC. So the topics of today's videos are we'll begin with ADOC incremental scan, and I'll follow it up with the discussion on ADOC incremental strategy, and we'll discuss on a brief demo on how to set up or how to use incremental strategy in both in policy and profiling. ADOC incremental scans. So, an incremental strategy in context of data profiling or a data scan allows the users to profile or scan an asset incrementally and get only the new process, only the new records or the change records in the large particular run. So this is done instead of scanning the whole data set or the full data set every time. So in Excel data or any data quality or data observability tool, an incremental scan reads only the newly added or updated records in the last timestamp. So where it uses a column called created at, updated at, or a particular timestamp watermark, applies filters internally so that we could get only the timestamp um, which is updated after the particular last record was read. This also works not only on timestamp. It also you could also use it on columns, an ID column where you could actually scan. You could you can run the incremental scan based on IDs and scan only the IDs after the particular initial offset that we provide. We will discuss about each of these strategies in the upcoming slides. Uh, so, uh, so these incremental scan works on certain data sources like Snowflake, Databricks, Hive, S3, etc. We'll also discuss it further. The whole use of the reason for having an incremental offset, an incremental scan um, is to uh, for efficient data profiling, enable so that we can enable users to focus on the new or changed data rather than having to reprofile or rescan your entire data set every time. This also improves performance, lowers computing cost, and enables near real-time observability. So, what is an incremental strategy? So, incremental strategy in terms of in terms of ADOC is it allows user to profile an asset incrementally. So meaning that they can first they profile the entire data set or a set number of rows, and then subsequently you only profile the additional rows over a particular time. So you only profile the newly added or changed records. So this is particularly useful for managing large data sets where profiling the entire data set at once could be inefficient or impractical. So during the configuration, what we could do is, in case if we are profiling or scanning an old database with huge volume of record, we could plan the strategy in such a way that we scan the database based on particular increments, or once all the historical data is scanned or profiled, for create a newly updated data which is getting added on your database. We only scan the updated records or the newly added records. The types of incremental strategies are auto increment ID based, where we monotonically increase the value from a specific column, which is mostly an ID column, to determine the bounds of selecting the data from a particular data source. For example, if we have a table with ID column that increases after every entry, or maybe like a key column where every time there is a key, the key is incremented or appended by one value. We could use that particular key to be increment to act as a increment ID, and every time there is append to it, that could be scanned. Partition based. So with partition based strategy, this allows you to profile the data based on specific partitions within your data set. For example, if your data is partitioned by your date or the region, we can choose to profile only the new partition or a particular partition that has been added since your last scanning or profiling session. Another or the most used feature is basically is the incremental date based, where the profile data is based on the date column, allows the select allows you to select the rows that have been added or modified since a particular specific date. For example, if you have a created at timestamp column, you can profile all the rows that are created at a date, which is great. You can allow to profile or scan records which are higher than the created at date. Similar to that, we can also profile based on incremental file based, where this is used for file based data sources like S3, etc., where you can profile or scan only the new files that is added to a particular specific directory since the last profiling session. And also the last one is the timestamp based, which is pretty similar to date strategy, but this gives you a more granular control over the over your records than a date. So basically, in summary, right? So these incremental strategies are essential for efficient data profiling, enabling users to focus on new or change data without having to reprofile the entire data set every time. So now let's go to an ADOC UI, and I'll show you how an incremental strategy is being used. To begin with, I'll show you with profiling. So we could actually set the incremental strategy in two places. One is for profiling and another is for data policy scans. So let's start with profiling. So selecting a Snowflake table called customers here, which is already onboarded on ADOC. So profile gives you two options to do a full profiling or a selective profiling. And within the selective profiling, you would have to specify the incremental strategy. So as we had mentioned earlier, the incremental strategy, the options would be ID, so where you select what would be the ID column. So right now you can select any of the ID column. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a primary key on the database side. So ADOC provides you the flexibility to select any column in ID. You can select what is the initial offset and what is the final offset. What would be the initial and final offset of the data that you want to profile. Similarly, you can uh, select date time, where you select what is the date column. So right now you can ADOC gives you an option to select any column type or a column with any data type when you in the drop down. It doesn't necessarily have to be a date. We are actually working on fixing this in the future releases so that we can only have the date columns in the drop down for a incremental strategy of date type. You can select the date format. This is the default one, but we recommend you to understand to understand what is a date time format on the database for this particular column that you select, and use that particular date format here. You could also select the initial and final timestamp. Additionally, you could also select you can also select time zone where you want to increment where you want to set the increment where you want to set the incremental profile of. So this is important because right now on the cloud ecosystems, if you are connected to an on-prem data source, your data sources might each have a different timestamp. So it's a better option to check with your data source admins to see what is the timestamp on the database, so that the time zone in your incremental data strategies ideally matches with the time zone that you're selecting for profiling. You can also select the offset minute and round and date. Let's select the next option, which is partition. Within the partition, you could actually select what is you could select what is the sub strategy. Like, say for example, you could select what is the default strategy, or is it a day, month, year strategy of partitions. So in default strategy, this default strategy uses a date based partition column to determine the bounds of selecting the date. So it's this partition default is only applicable if the data source supports partitioning. So basically, whatever partition is present on the data source, you have to understand that. Like say for example, if customer table is partitioned on the Snowflake side, and it's Snowflake and it's partition based on the registration date. So we could use that partitioning option, and we could basically use that partition option, and we could that particular column, and you could leverage the partition from you could select the partition from the database to on your profiling. The other option is the day month year partitioning. uh, in this involves more granular partitioning based on the specific date components. So here, you could select the day column, the month column, and the year column for in case if you're in this strategy, if you have uh, the columns the selected, if you have the columns in your database which where the day, month, and years are stored, we could actually also use them. You could also select the frequency with which the frequency of the partitions, and also the initial and final timestamp along with the time zone that we discussed earlier. Similarly, within now we just discussed how the incremental strategy is used in profiling. Now let's see how the incremental strategy is used within a data quality scan. Uh, so I'm just selecting a already created existing data quality object, viewing the policy. You could see that there is an option for incremental check, which are not configured. Let's edit it and try to configure it. Editing this option, you could select the toggle icon to enable it incrementally. You could see the incremental strategy columns here. This is pretty similar to what I just discussed with regard to profiling. You could the incremental strategy could be based on ID, it could be based on date time, or it could also be based on partitions. And within partition, there is a strategy of default and day, month, year. Additionally, in the initial slides, you might have seen that there was one more option of a file-based partition system, right? So let us select any of a file-based object, let's say an S3 object. So here, when you select as a file system, a file based data source like an S3, right? You will see an option to set the partition based on the file, where you could provide the initial and final offset dates along with the timestamp to select the incremental strategy, which is based on the file. Yeah. Going back to the slides. So this was a quick demo or some quick introduction on how to use incremental strategy on the scans or profiling that we do on ADOC. So when we basically decide on what kind of a strategy needs to be used, we will have to work on we have to consider multiple things like what is the data type, what is how is the data refreshed on your database, what are the partitions that are created, how is the data frequent, how does the data frequency schedule looks like, etc. So let's please feel free to connect to us with your requirements, and we will help you with solutioning and designing the right incremental scan strategy for you. Please connect to us with your questions, with comments on this video. If you don't get a response, please feel free to continue the conversation on the discussion forum in the Excel Data Network portal. Thank you. Have a great day.